I can think of one aunt in particular. She's on her feet a lot. She's an LVN. She's constantly hovering over patients. She's got horrific varicose veins. But her daughters and her sons do not have them. So it's not necessarily a genetic thing, but it can be a predisposition. All right, hemorrhoids are another perfect application of valves and accumulation of fluid and then getting this, well, a hemorrhoid, of course, is a large, well, let me rephrase. Your anal sinuses, these are large veins around your anus, not the planet. Anyway, if you are pregnant and you have that fetus pushing on the large veins in your abdominal cavity, like the common iliac veins before they get to the inferior vena cava, if you've got that baby and you're laying on your back and that baby is pushing on those veins, you can actually get more blood that is retained in the lower extremities. So the woman would present with edema. Well, what does that have to do with hemorrhoids? Well, if you are straining to have a bowel movement, or you are straining to deliver that said parasite, you also can be compressing those veins to the point where the blood is being dammed up to these anal sinuses, and now those veins can actually bulge into the mucosa. So the bulging veins is a hemorrhoid, and they're very, very painful. And you have to wait for that fluid to be absorbed and get back where it should be, and they take time to resolve. But if you are pushing to have a baby and you are holding your breath and not breathing through your pushes, then yes, it is very likely you will have hemorrhoids. Don't have a baby. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
Now, is there such thing as inner hemorrhoids and outer hemorrhoids? And
Inner hemorrhoid?
like outside
Okay.
and inside, and then they got that other one that's called, I don't know all the names.
So some hemorrhoids can get so bad where literally the blood vessel is causing the mucosa to protrude out of the anus opening. So doesn't that sound like fun, Carissa?
So glad we're going into detail about it. Super.
Okay, but you probably will be doing a rotation through an OB-GYN ward, and so how are you going to treat the female patient who has never had a hemorrhoid in her life? You need vasoconstrictors. Now, do you actually insert something into the woman's ass? No. But you probably never even noticed it when you were walking through the grocery store. Have you ever seen the little Tux witch hazel pads? Right? So that witch hazel is a natural astringent. It will cause the tunica media to contract more, and that can help push the blood away from that anal sinus back to a larger vein and return to the heart. So when she's recovering and she's sore and swollen down there, they'll give her the big ice packs that she, then uses her underwear to keep around that sore area. All the moms who have had children are going, yeah, I remember walking around with the big ice packs between my legs. But we also give her a container of the Tux witch hazel, and she puts them on top of the pad. We also give her a pad because she'll be bleeding, of course, and you can't use a tampon. Nothing should be inserted in the vagina for 6 weeks after postpartum. So they give you the pad, they give you also an ice pack, and then they also give you the witch hazel, and you put it along the pad, and so it's very soothing and cooling, and it helps with the hemorrhoids to get them to go away.
And that's what's found in those like creams that you were to buy in like the drugstore?
The preparation H, yes.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. But witch hazel pads, they do the same thing, and plus they have that cooling effect. It feels so good.
Can they come back?
Yes, they can come back, and if you're overweight, that can exacerbate the tendency of having hemorrhoids. So the reason, okay, I know it's too much detail for those of you who have not had children, but with my first child, I did get the a-hole OB-GYN who was on call for the weekend. See, you can pick the doctor you want, but depending on when you go into labor, you will get the doctor who's on call. They don't always call the doctor that you signed up for. They don't tell you that on Baby Story and TV, do they? So I did have that doctor who was perturbed that he was called in. And I did have that doctor who yelled at me and said, I want this baby born by 2 p.m.
Wow.
And he meant it, because he then ordered the nurse to start a pit drip, Pitocin, oxytocin, and quote, this is what the nurse said. As she stroked my hair, she said, honey, I've never seen a flow rate for oxytocin this high. We'll try it and see how you do. With an epidural, I still felt the contractions. It was insane. And then when he was telling me to push, there was no break. It was push and keep pushing. I had hemorrhoids so bad that the nurses came in. It was a teaching hospital where I was. They brought the students in because they had never seen hemorrhoids that bad. I know. So all of you are like, yeah, get her. So for weeks it felt like a bowling ball. Wiping, it felt like I was going like the baboon with big swollen belly. It was horrible. But I recovered. I haven't had them since, just so you want to know, right? Okay. I'm human too. Never ever having a baby. Right? Okay, so best choice for the second child, female and nurse midwife. Totally different experience. But there are male nurse midwives that I'm sure are very, very good too. I think he had a tee-off time for golf.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Because Hayden was born at 1:57 p.m.
Oh, good job. That's the wire.
I was so hungry though at the end of that. I was so starving. We ordered pizza and honey, the nurses thought it was funny to have the delivery boy come into the delivery room. That was not something he wanted to see. They weren't done cleaning. But I got my pizza. Okay. It was fun. No, you do not. There's so much more to know and love, Carissa. You don't know everything.
Aren't you happy that you're not teaching this class over the summer, like, to...
No, I will not do that again. This is a good time, speaking of hemorrhoids, to talk about capacitance or distensibility, compliance. Now, I want you to think of you taking your garden hose, and I want you to think about you taking a water balloon, and I want you to think about you taking a normal air balloon. Walk up to your garden hose, take your deepest breath in, and blow. And I want you to inflate it. I want you to get it to expand. The garden hose.
There's
Okay.
stuff all over. It's nasty.
Okay. Okay. It's clean. We'll clean it off
Witch hazel?
with the witch hazel. Then I want you to take the water balloon. Have you ever tried to inflate a water balloon with air? Totally thicker latex material. Very difficult to inflate that with a puff of air. Now I want you to think of a pretty well stretched out typical balloon, and that same breath, and you get the expansion. So distensibility is going to determine capacitance. They are not the same thing. The more distensible, stretchable, compliant a blood vessel is, the more its capacitance, its ability to hold blood, store it. When we're talking about a distensible pressure and capacitance, this is what I want you to think of. You're walking up to your garden hose, your water balloon, and your traditional air balloon. For each three, you take the same amount of inhalation, the same volume, and for each of the three, you blow with the same force. Of those three structures, which one will be the most distensible for that force of air that you're ejecting, exhaling from your body, and therefore will have the more capacitance, storage of air. The regular air balloon. So that is the reason why we say veins are more distensible than arteries. They're more compliant, and therefore they have greater capacitance, ability to store blood. And that is the reason why we call them your reservoir, your blood reservoir, capacitance vessels. Okay, Ohm's law. Have you stopped?
Yeah.
And restarted? How many times? Because I didn't even hear it.
Twice.
Oh, good for you. And it's going?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. All right, so this is a picture of the Colorado River going through Grand Canyon. Honey and I had done a hike up to see one of the cliff dwelling structures that were up there. And as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, I see water flowing below me. This is a perfect application of Ohm's law. I need to put this in my physiology lecture. So I want you to think about, just in this snapshot of time, we have water flowing from one point to another point. When we speak of blood flow or water flow, we say so many milliliters or liters in a given amount of time. So as I'm sitting here, I'm seeing water flow. I could project how many thousands of liters in 1 hour was going across or through that river while I was sitting there. So Ohm's law uses Q with a little dot. I couldn't do that on the PowerPoint. There should be a little dot over Q. That represents flow. The units for flow will be milliliters per minute or liters per minute. Some sort of volume in a given amount of time. We need a pressure gradient. We need a driving force for flow. This water is flowing from an area of high pressure to low. If there were no pressure changes, we wouldn't call it a river. We would call it a lake, right? The water would have stasis. Resistance. What's the resistance that you see in the river? Rocks. All right, you may not see it from this picture, but where there are rocks in the river, if someone were to pour detergent in the river by the rocks, what do you think would happen? Start to bubble because there's turbulent flow, right? So resistance is going to come in the form of something impeding the flow through the blood vessel. That can be an atherosclerotic plaque, say, for example. But in normal, healthy conditions, when we think of resistance, we think of the radius changing. But that's not the only form of resistance. Not just lumen and radius of the blood vessel. We can also think about blood viscosity. The thicker blood is, the less flow we will have. We can also think about blood vessel length. The longer the length, the more resistance there is. The more opportunity for blood to experience drag from the vessel wall. So there are many types of resistance, but the number one will be the lumen, the radius of the lumen. Now, can we rearrange these values? We can. If you know two of them, could you predict the third? Okay, so we need to start playing this game. If pressure goes up, what happens to the amount of flow? There is a direct relationship between the two, right? They're both in the numerator. It would be weird if you went to your hose valve and you turned it all the way open and yet the amount of water that came out lessened. That wouldn't make sense, right? So there's a direct relationship, a one-to-one relationship. If pressure doubles, you would expect flow to double. Resistance is inversely related. If resistance goes up, flow will go down. So that is what I mean by, can you rearrange this equation? If you know two, could you predict the third? Okay, good. All right, so as I said, blood flow is going to be a volume in a given amount of time. This is honey trying to fly fish. in an area where you just would not predict trout to be biting. I don't know why he was doing. The flow rate was way too